And we are back. What is up, good people? This is Luther, and this is the Guessnicity Podcast. And this is the place where I give the case and you guess the race. And today, this week, I am joined by myself. This is not planned this week. This is not one of those where, hey, I'm going to do a bonus episode because, no. My guests all kind of bailed on me. I initially had two guests lined up. One fell off, had some conflicts with his daughter. I understood. Cool. My other guest has their own podcast and they're good at this. So I figured, okay, maybe we could do one-on-one. But I also mentioned somebody else that we could possibly bring on with them, right? I said, so let me check. They already told me what days of the week they could record because they were out of town, saying Thursday, Friday, any day after Wednesday. And I'm like, okay, cool. I checked with the other person. I asked two other people to record with them. And they ghosted me. So I was like, okay. One of them ghosted me. The other one had a conflict of interest at that time. Did something with their child. Again, they were willing to sacrifice and do it, but I said, nope, don't miss anything for your child. I'm not that kind of person. And then the other one just never responded. We'll say that. And then so I go back to the one person that I had lined up. I tell him, hey, probably just be me and you, but can you do Thursday evening or Friday? I'm off and we can record any point on Friday all day. And no response. So it's now Sunday, Father's Day. Tam offered to record, but our laptop is messed up and I didn't like the sound quality with her and her sister. So I said, fuck it. I will just do it on my own to make sure I get something out to you guys. So I have three cases I was going to bring with the folks I was going to record with. But we'll do it solo. We'll go through it. I'll just talk to you guys, man. So picture the case as I go through it. Who do you think would be doing these crimes? I'll probably ask questions like I'm talking to you. Give you some pause and time to kind of think about it. Just like the last time I did a solo, man. Leave your guesses in the comments and let me know what you thought for each case. Again, hey, I apologize for me being solo. It's not going to be a whole lot of banter like we normally have because it is just me. But again, with it just being me, this will probably be a shorter episode, but we will be back on track, man. I'm about to start trying to schedule things out for July, and hopefully the goal for July is to be back weekly. So I know a lot of you guys will be looking forward to that. I just don't want to fall behind too much and lose my listenership because I'm not putting out enough content for you guys. But enough with that being said, man, let's jump into this episode. But before we get going, let me ask you guys a question. Think of the worst coworker you've had. Envision that person, because today we are dealing with cases where a coworker or a boss or somebody just killed somebody that they work with or had an altercation with somebody that they work with. And with that, you're going to have to guess what happened, and we'll go from there. I guess who did the crime and guess who did the killing, of course. You know how it goes on here. But feel free to leave your guesses in the comments, man, and enjoy. And I will try to make this as entertaining as possible. So do you have that your worst coworker in your head? Now imagine that this person annoys you every single day. Then one day they take credit for your work. Then they start talking about you behind your back. Then management doesn't do anything about it. How long before somebody snaps? Let's find out in this first case. Our first case takes us to January 2021. A woman is employed by a manufacturing facility for years. Coworkers describe her as hardworking. Others describe her as quiet. Some say she kept mostly to herself. But according to investigators, tension had been building. There had reportedly been disagreements at work, conflicts with coworkers, and growing resentment. Exactly how much resentment? Nobody realized until it was too late. January 20th of 2021, employees arrived for another workday. The facility is busy, machines are running, workers are moving through their usual routines. Nothing seems unusual, but according to investigators, one employee arrives carrying a firearm. Nobody around her realizes what is about to happen. A woman enters the building. She knows exactly where she's going, and according to authorities, she's looking for a specific person. Not a manager or a supervisor, but a coworker. The target is a woman who has worked alongside her. At some point, the suspect locates the victim, then gunfire erupts. Employees immediately begin running. People are screaming. Some attempt to hide. Others rush toward the building. The victim collapses. Emergency services are called. Coworkers attempt to help, but the injuries are severe. The victim dies. Meanwhile, the shooter leaves. Not only does she leave, she disappears. Police arrive and quickly identify a suspect, but there's a problem. Nobody knows where she is. Hours pass, then days, then weeks, still no arrest. Investigators begin conducting interviews. Coworkers describe workplace tensions. Rumors begin spreading. Some claim there had been ongoing disputes. Others claim the suspect believed coworkers were talking about her. Investigators continue searching. Then the case becomes even stranger. Police learn that the suspect may not be alone. Authorities begin focusing their attention on another individual, the suspect's husband. Investigators believe he may have helped her flee. Now law enforcement agencies in multiple states are involved. The search expands. Weeks go by. The suspect remains missing. Then, nearly 2 months later, a break finally comes in. March 2021. Authorities locate the suspect and her husband at a motel, hundreds of miles away from the crime scene. Both are taken into custody. The murder case can finally move forward, but investigators still face a major question. What exactly caused this woman to allegedly murder a coworker? Years later, prosecutors would argue that workplace grievances and personal conflicts played a role. Defense attorneys would challenge aspects of the case. The legal battle continues. Eventually, rather than proceed to trial, the suspect accepts a plea agreement. The case finally reaches a conclusion. So with that being said, what are you guys thinking? Woman working at a manufacturing facility kills a coworker, then has her husband go on the run with her to help her escape. Where does your mind go to? What race are you thinking of? Investigators believe she came there looking for that specific coworker. Of course. That means she had time to think, then drive there, time to change her mind, and she still went through with it. All right, so our main suspect in this case, the woman, pled guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 20 to 25 years in prison. Her husband was sentenced with an accessory charge, and they gave him 48 to 72 months, so about 5 to 6 years in prison, or 4 to 6 years in prison, So our suspects, I guess plural names in this case, are main suspect who did the killing, Tangela Parker, and her husband, Eric Parker. All right, so we have Tangela and Eric Parker. When I hear Parker, I think of Friday. Hey, Miss Parker. When you gonna let me fuck Miss Parker? That's what I think of when I hear Miss Parker. But please believe this Miss Parker is not one that you would be talking about, hey, Miss Parker, and asking that specific question to. I can promise you that. And I'm not, trying to shame anybody, but this Miss Parker is most definitely not one that men would be running towards having fantasies about, I feel like. At least not most men. There may be some. Who knows? But Tangela Parker and Eric Parker, what race did you think when you hear that? This case did happen and took place in North Carolina. They were apprehended in Arizona. And with that, our suspects in this case, race would be, or ethnicity, white. Tangela and Eric Parker. Let me show you what they look like. There is Tangela and Eric. I know when you hear Tangela with a T, it almost makes you think black, because my people do like to tweak names a little bit. And Tangela, in my mind, I probably would have went, oh, this is a black chick per se. Working manufacturing company too, possibly like warehouse work, maybe, But nope, they are both two white individuals, and actually older individuals at that. I want to say that, she's in her 50s and he is in his 60s when I went through this, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, Tangela and Eric. I think I have one other picture of them too as well. I was about to say that can't be the same people, but no, that is the same folks. So yeah, there's another picture from another article of these two guys. Crazy. Now let's move on to our next case. All right, so our next case starts with a man who many people would describe as a good employee. He showed up to work, worked long hours, supported his family. And according to people who knew him, he wasn't afraid to speak up when he believed something was wrong. Unfortunately, that decision may have cost him his life. We have a company that has contracts with utility companies throughout the region. The work is difficult. Employees spend long hours and long days outdoors. Many of the employees are immigrants, some documented, some are undocumented. One employee begins noticing something strange. Coworkers are complaining about their pay. People say money is missing. Workers claim they aren't receiving what they earned. At first, it sounds like the kind of complaint you hear at a lot of jobs, but according to federal prosecutors, there was much more going on behind the scenes. Investigators would later allege that a supervisor and his brother had created a scheme involving employee payroll. According to prosecutors, workers were being hired under false identities. Paychecks were being routed through accounts controlled by the brothers. Money was allegedly being skimmed from workers before the workers ever received it. Over time, prosecutors say the scheme generated millions of dollars, but there was a problem. One employee knew too much or just felt that something was off way too much. That employee begins talking to coworkers. He starts asking questions. According to court records, he doesn't just complain, he documents and gathers evidence. Eventually, he decides to report what he's seeing because he isn't just somebody gossiping in the break room. This is somebody who's taking information to management and eventually to the government. The employee first submits complaints internally. According to prosecutors, that doesn't solve anything, so he keeps pushing. Months pass. The employee becomes increasingly convinced that coworkers are being exploited. Federal investigators would later say he believed that co-workers were being cheated out of their wages. Then comes a major turning point. August of 2017, the employee files a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or the EEOC. This isn't just workplace drama. Now there's a federal paper trail. There are records, there's documentation, and according to prosecutors, people connected to the scheme find out. 2 days after they find out, the employee is dead. August 19th, of 2017, the victim is outside of his home. It's a normal day. Nothing appears unusual. And then out of nowhere, gunfire erupts. The victim is shot multiple times. The shooter flees. Police arrive. Family members are devastated. Coworkers are stunned. Investigators immediately begin asking questions. Was this random or was this victim targeted? As detectives dig deeper, they discovered the victim had recently filed complaints. He had accused people connected to his workplace of wrongdoing. Suddenly, the murder looks different. Investigators begin reviewing financial records, employment records, phone records, witness statements. What they uncover paints a clear picture. Federal prosecutors eventually allege that the murder wasn't spontaneous. They say it was retaliation against a whistleblower. According to prosecutors, the victim was killed because he threatened a profitable scheme. Investigators eventually identify multiple suspects, a supervisor, the very person the victim had been reporting. Authorities allege the supervisor arranged the plot. Another man allegedly served as a getaway driver, and the supervisor's brother allegedly pulled the trigger. What started as a workplace complaint had now become a federal murder conspiracy case. Years later, prosecutors would present evidence showing that the victim had reported the scheme internally and then to federal authorities shortly before he was killed. They alleged that millions of dollars had been skimmed from workers over several years. Eventually, guilty pleas and convictions followed, but by then, the whistleblower was already gone. So, with that, what are you thinking? Male or female? Young or old? What race are we guessing? All right, so this case took place in Effingham County, Georgia. And now that you know the location, does that change the race that you're thinking of, or does it keep it the same? Well, our suspects in this case are Pablo Rangel Rubio, 53, and his brother Juan Rangel Rubio, 45. So they are Hispanic, actually Mexican. I can say Mexican because they are Mexican nationals. So now here's where the story gets a little crazier. According to federal prosecutors, Pablo was not the shooter. Pablo was the supervisor. He was the boss. The man investigators said helped oversee the wage skimming operation that our victim was exposing. Juan was his brother, and according to prosecutors, after our victim filed complaints and began cooperating with authorities, the brothers viewed him as a threat. Federal investigators eventually uncovered evidence that linked both brothers to the conspiracy to silence our victim. Prosecutors alleged that Pablo helped arrange the retaliation. Juan was accused of carrying out the murder on the 19th. All right. So Juan Rangel, the brother, was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. Pablo Rangel pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges related to the retaliation scheme and received a sentence of more than 48 years in prison. I got photos of one of the brothers. I got photos of Pablo. I don't have any photos of Juan, but I will show you Pablo. So apparently they were illegal too. Somehow, how do you start a business and you're legal? I wonder how that shit works. But not to get political, please believe we don't get political on here, but to me that they can get their own business and be illegal at the same time. And there he is, Pablo Rangel Rubio, Mexican illegal, as you see in the article that I'm showing you. All right, guys, let's move on to our last case. All right, our last case begins with a man who spent years working at the same restaurant. By all accounts, he was dependable, reliable, the kind of employee that showed up every day and kept the business running. He had worked his way into management. Co-workers and customers knew him, and after years of hard work, it looked like life might be finally throwing him a break. A few days before his death, the manager received an inheritance check, thousands of dollars. According to investigators, he cashed the check and showed a roll of cash to several employees while at work. That's the big mistake, man. You get some money, you cash it, and you want to show the roll of money to your employees at work or your coworkers. Yeah, no, that's not what we do. That's not a smart move. You don't even mention your inheritance, in my opinion. You don't tell nobody nothing, man. Keep that shit to yourself. Some estimates put the amount around $7,000. A lot of money for some people, especially to a person who may be struggling, especially to people who feel like life hasn't dealt them a fair hand. So February 5th, 2024, the manager arrives at work early in the morning. Restaurant records show he clocked in around 9:30 a.m. Everything appears normal. The restaurant opens. Preparation begins. Business continues. Then something strange happens. Around 10:09 a.m., investigators later discover the cash register is open, not for a sale or for a customer, just open. Management will later describe this as unusual. Then sometime after that, the manager vanishes. No cause, no explanation. No one hears from him again. The following day, co-workers become concerned. The manager was scheduled to work. He never shows up. That wasn't like him. Family members can't reach him. Co-workers can't reach him. His phone appears active, but nobody can find him. Then comes a horrifying discovery. 2 days later, a garbage truck driver notices something unusual behind the restaurant, near a dumpster. There is a small rolling trash can sitting by itself. Something about it looks wrong. The driver contacts police. Officers arrive. As they approach the container, they immediately realize this is not a missing person case. Inside the trash can is a body. Investigators begin examining the scene. They notice blood beneath the container. Then they notice something more disturbing, a trail. Blood droplets leading away from the dumpster. The trail leads directly back to the restaurant, through the rear door into the kitchen. Investigators now believe the victim wasn't killed outside, but killed inside the restaurant. The restaurant is secured. Search warrants are obtained. Crime scene investigators begin processing the building. And what they find raises even more questions. The kitchen is filthy. Greasy floors, dirty surfaces, exactly what you would expect in a busy restaurant, except for one area. One section of floor appears to be freshly cleaned. Investigators describe it as noticeably different from everything around it. Then they find a door. One side is grimy. The other side appears to be freshly wiped down. Cleaning solution is visible. As investigators continue searching, they discover what appears to be blood inside a utility closet. Blood in the sink, blood on a mop, blood on the light switch, blood on the mop handle. Somebody did not do a good job cleaning this shit. Somebody spent considerable effort trying to clean up, but they didn't do a good job. Medical examiners later determined the victim had been shot in the head at close range. He also suffered injuries consistent with an attempted cutting attack and blunt force trauma. The death was ruled a homicide. Now detectives began asking a simple question. Who was inside the restaurant that morning? Security cameras provide one major clue. Video from a nearby business shows an individual dragging a large rolling trash can toward the dumpster area. The person appears to be struggling with the weight. Minutes later, the same person returns to the restaurant, but now the trash can is gone. Detectives continue reviewing surveillance footage, bus cameras, business cameras, and traffic cameras. Piece by piece, they began tracking the movements of the suspect. Then they learned something interesting. The victim's phone had sent text messages after investigators believed he had already been dead. Messages claiming he was sick, messages claiming he left work, messages designed to make coworkers believe nothing was wrong. Someone was pretending to be him. The question was, who? Well, we know who. They know who at this point because they had him on camera. So, in my opinion, it's obvious. It's got to be a coworker because this guy was flashing money at work of his little inheritance that he got, man. He got broke off 7 G's, which is cool, but 7 G's is not a lot of money. It's a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money, depending on who you are, you know? So that's crazy. So in this case, what are you thinking? Who do you think killed our suspect? Man or woman? And what race? This case takes place in Milwaukee. If you're from Milwaukee, you may have a heads up if I say South Milwaukee. I'm not from there, but I know somebody from there. Good friend that lives there. So South Milwaukee, we're looking at a coworker that killed somebody in a restaurant. The restaurant here, to get more specific, was a Pizza Hut. So in this case, what are you thinking? All right, the suspect in this case name is Kayvon Ingram. He is indeed an African-American male. And here is Kayvon for you guys. Yep, African-American male. So that brings us to the end of this episode. I know this is much shorter. Like I said, going forward, hopefully at the beginning of July, I'm going back to week. I'm about to start planning out my guests, getting them mapped out further in advance. Hopefully this will help alleviate some of the issues I had this week. I still love them cats, even though they irritated the fuck out of me this week with the way everything was handled. Communication, man, that's all it takes. If you can't make it, just let me know. Anyway, thank you guys for listening. Thank you for all of my supporters who always have been holding it down, man. Listening, keep, liking, comment, subscribing, keep sharing the content with everybody, guys. We're going to pick it up this second half of the year and get back on point. I should be in a place where I can do that, even with the personal training stuff, man. I love every single one of you guys, man. Peace. Have a good one. Bye.